Good. We are in the book of Habakkuk in the Bible. An easy trick to remember where Habakkuk is. It's the book that's just after Nahum and just before Zephaniah. So I hope that helps. Got to have a system. Here's a bit of Hebrew for you all. Do you know what the word Habakkuk means in Hebrew? It means basil, right? So we're actually looking at the book of Basil today. So Basil chapter 2, mainly, we're going to be having a look at. That kind of endears him to you a little bit more, doesn't it? Not so much this obtuse Habakkuk, but let's think of him as Basil. And what we're going to look at is in chapter 2, Habakkuk has one particular sentence that has absolutely rocked the world that you and I live in. Whether you're a Christian or not, the world you live in has been shaped by one sentence that Habakkuk wrote. And I'll see if you can think which sentence that is as we read it. But we're in this series on fearless, and we've been thinking about being fearless, being doubtless. Today we're thinking about being timeless. We're thinking really about what happens when our sense of time and God's sense of time doesn't match up, what happens when our sense of plans and God's plans don't really match up, and we feel like He's pressed pause on our plans, when we feel like there is delay, when we feel like we have to wait and we can't wait. Habakkuk is actually all about that issue, about what do we do with delay? How do we wait as Christians? In Habakkuk chapter 1, Habakkuk's got this complaint, and he comes before God, and he says, God, where are you? There is so much evil around there in the world. There seems to be mayhem everywhere. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you as a contemporary situation, but there seems to be mayhem going on, political turmoil, and I don't really know what's going on. Where are you? And God answers that complaint from verse 4 of chapter 1. And he says, don't worry, Habakkuk, I am really, really busy. I'm not taking a back seat. I'm doing plenty. I tell you what I'm doing. I'm stirring up an angry superpower who's going to come and overrun you completely. Which it's fair to say was probably not the comfort that Habakkuk was looking for, really. You're gonna stir up this evil superpower against us? Is this what you're up to, God? Is this how you're acting in the world? And yeah, this is what God was doing back there, 600 years BC. And it's interesting, just recently, as we look at newspaper headlines that say mayhem, and we feel like, is God taking a back seat? So often people will think, oh well, God's out of control because there is mayhem, supposedly. What if God is stirring up discords for a reason? What if God is behind some of these things? And actually, it's a bit like Simon's sermon recently on Habakkuk. He was talking about taking his kids away from CBeebies and wrenching them away from the TV set. Do you remember that if you were here? And the kids would think at that moment, don't you love me? What are you doing? This is crazy. We've got a good thing going on. Why are you messing with it? And so often we feel that way with God. We feel, why are you messing with this thing? We've gotten used to this thing. But actually, God does that. Doesn't stop him from being a loving father. Maybe he's doing something different, something new. This is a different kind of God we're dealing with. This is not the God that we would have imagined in our heads. The God we imagine in our heads acts exactly as we would act, and God is never like that. So Habakkuk says, God, what are you doing? And God says, I'm stirring up this evil superpower to defeat you. All right? And then from verse 12, Habakkuk's got a new problem. He's like, well, why these evil Babylonians? This evil superpower, they really are nasty pieces of work, God, and your eyes are too pure to even look on evil. How are you able to allow them to judge us? How is that even fair? And in Habakkuk chapter 2, God answers Habakkuk. And essentially his answer in this chapter is going to be, don't worry about the Babylonians, all right? I'm going to judge them too. I'm going to judge the whole world. What I want you to do, Habakkuk, is I want you to cling on, hold on, wait, be patient. Because on the far side of this global judgment, there is a salvation that will set the world to rights. So wait, be patient. Take heart, I'm coming soon. That's what chapter 2 is all about. Let me read it. Habakkuk 2 verse 1, I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come, it will not delay. Behold, his soul is puffed up, it is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by his faith. That is the famous sentence. Remember I said there's one sentence in Habakkuk that has absolutely rocked this world? It's the last bit of verse 4. The righteous shall live by his faith. Or let me slightly rearrange the words so you get what he's saying. The one who is righteous by faith shall live. The one who is righteous by faith shall live. And this sentence has absolutely shaped the world that you live in. It's quoted a couple of times in the New Testament. So Paul quotes it in both Romans chapter 1 and in Galatians chapter 3. These key chapters on saying, you know what? We're saved by faith, not by works. We're saved by Christ, not by our own efforts. We receive this salvation as a gift. The one who is righteous by faith shall live. Because the one who pretends to be righteous by their works shall die. And this has been a huge verse in the New Testament. And then going on down through the centuries, we come to the time of Martin Luther in the 16th century. And Martin Luther got the Reformation going, the Protestant Reformation going, by really concentrating on this verse from Habakkuk chapter 2. Martin Luther, you might know, he was this Augustinian monk, and he was very hard-working at the monk thing. He said his prayers 7 times a day. He was always confessing his sins, always lashing himself, sometimes literally, because of his own sense of unworthiness and shame. And he lived before God trying to earn his own righteousness. And he was reading Romans chapter 1. And in Romans chapter 1, it sort of talked about the righteousness of God is being revealed from heaven. And Martin Luther thought that was a fearful thing. He thought he was being judged from heaven, like God was holding up the standard of righteousness above him. And Martin Luther thought, I can never get my head around this. I don't even like this God who I'm meant to be serving. And then Martin Luther says, but then I paid attention to Habakkuk. Then I paid attention to the verse that Paul quotes, and it's Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. The one who is righteous by faith shall live. And Luther says, when I understood Habakkuk, I understood everything. Everything fell into place. And I suddenly realized that actually God's righteousness is a gift that's given to us to be received by faith. And he says, when I understood that, here I felt that I was altogether born again and had entered paradise itself through open gates. And it's all down to Habakkuk. Hey, good job, Basil. Okay. Basil done good, don't you think? This sentence rocked his world, gave him new life, and that reformation in turn gave the whole world new life. This is really the turning point from the medieval world to the modern world as people grappled with Habakkuk. So it's worth getting to understand this prophet, don't you think? He's absolutely shaped the world that you live in. And especially, it's worth getting a hold of verse 4. The one who is righteous by faith shall live. So what does that mean? Well, what does righteousness mean? Righteousness is another word for being justified. It's the same word, actually. Righteousness and justified is the same word. It's really about having your existence justified. To be righteous is to be okay in the world. To be righteous is kind of to have this heavenly like given to you. Like in Facebook, this heavenly Facebook like. God just gives you the thumbs up. And it's okay now. You are liked by the one person who really matters. And you can hold your head high and you can walk out into the world because you are righteous. What's interesting about righteousness is that we're all looking for it. In fact, you can't not look for it. All of us are desperate to be righteous, whether we're religious or not. There's an atheist author, he's now dead, but he was called David Foster Wallace. And he spoke about this universal need for righteousness. He puts it in slightly different terms here, but he's talking about this universal need to be justified, this universal need to tap your meaning from something. And he gave this famous speech in 2005. He says, in the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough, never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally plant you. Worship power, and you will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, and always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they are evil or sinful, it's that they are unconscious. They are default settings. Isn't that fascinating? Written by an atheist. Here's the default setting of the human heart. You need righteousness. You need to justify your own existence. You need to tap meaning from something, anything. And you will go after this thing and that thing and all these good things that are out there, but they are unworthy of your ultimate trust. And if you trust in these things, you will end up killing yourself, really. But we all have to worship something. We all have to find significance and worth and meaning and justification in something. And I think this explains why we've had such a heated election season, don't you think? Why people haven't just put forward their vision for the good life in the United Kingdom, but people have demonized the other side. People have not just said, I think I am right, but they've also said, therefore you are wrong. People who, they can't even keep a clean desk, but they want to tell Facebook how to run the country, and fill their feeds with not only a vision for the good and right life, but a vision for how evil the other side is. I logged onto Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and the trending hashtag was Curse Theresa May. That was the hashtag, Curse Theresa May. And the hashtag began as a joke. People were just making up these sort of mock maledictions on Theresa May, but all of a sudden it just got flooded by thousands upon tens of thousands upon hundreds of thousands of people who are cursing Theresa May, not just criticizing her opinions, criticizing her policies, criticizing her strategy. Go for your life on that, please. But cursing the person of Theresa May. And you just think, what are we, voodoo doctors? If you go to someone's house and in the corner there's this figurine, you say, what's that? And they say, that's my Theresa May doll. I stick pins in it every day. You'd think that person was unbalanced, wouldn't you? And yet people are doing it online, existentially, emotionally, doing it all the time, sticking pins in other people. The Bible kind of says our biggest problem in life is not so much being wrong. Everybody's wrong. Our biggest problem is being right. Being so sure that we're right. And if I'm right, you must be wrong, mustn't you? I saw this cartoon about the eternal mantra, we are good and they are bad, always. Never forget that. We are good and they are bad. And you know why we do that? You know why we demonize the other side? We need the other side to be wrong because that makes us right. And we need this righteousness, don't we? This sense of self. The sense of justification. And we seek it in all the wrong places, and it kills us, and it kills our society. We tend to think that really there is, on the one hand, the good people, like me and my friends, and on the other hand, there are the bad people, the wicked people. So we might think that we are the ones, me and my mates, we are the ones who get things right in life. And we deserve all the good things to happen. We're the good people, we deserve the goodies. But out there are the bad people, and they deserve the bad things. That's what we kind of think. And in biblical language, it's like we all think that we are in the house of God and we're going to inherit salvation. But out there in the nasty world, those are the people who deserve judgment. The Israelites were very, very tempted to think this way because they literally were God's chosen people, right? The children of Israel. And they're very tempted to think, look, we are God's chosen people, the other nations are the Gentiles. We are the children, they are the dogs. But before we think of them as being primitive and we are the progressive ones, we've got to look at ourselves and think, you know what? We're still doing that thing today, aren't we? We're still doing that self-justification thing. In the car on the way here, you know what? As I was driving along the A27, everyone who drove slower than me was an idiot. And everyone who drove faster than me was a maniac, right? But I drive just right, okay? I'll have you know that. We're all doing that, all the time. I'm in the house of God and the world out there deserves judgment. But actually, Habakkuk and all the prophets and the whole Bible tells a very different story. The picture in Habakkuk is very much like this. The house of God is the first recipient of God's judgment. Now that's a shock, isn't it? Here comes judgment, and first in line for judgment are the people of God. That's what Habakkuk is all about, you know. Habakkuk's like, what are you doing in the world, God? And God's saying, I'm judging you, right? And then Habakkuk says, well, what are you going to do with all the nations? He says, don't worry about them. They'll get their comeuppance, but I'm judging you first. Okay? This is how it works, actually. It's not that these lovely house of God people avoid the judgment. It's that they come through the judgment. They are the first to receive the judgment, and then the nations. There's a verse in 1 Peter chapter 4 that speaks of, here it is time for judgment to begin at the house of God, the household of God. And if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? See, the house of God, the household of God, the family of God, the people of God, they're first in line for God's critical gaze. And then the nations. And that's what we see in Habakkuk chapter 2. And it completely annihilates judgmentalism, doesn't it? It completely annihilates self-righteousness. Because the pointing finger out there makes us realize we've got three fingers pointing back at us. And this is what happens in Habakkuk chapter 2. God is reassuring Habakkuk that yes, judgment will first hit the house of God, but I will then judge the Babylonians. Another name for them is the Chaldeans. And I will visit 5 woes on them because they are bad too. The whole world is bad. And we'll have a look at these 5 woes that are on these Babylonians. But as we look at these 5 woes about the people out there, the nasty people out there, we'll realize that as we point our finger at them, we've got 3 fingers pointing back at ourselves. As we have a look at these woes from verse 6, the first thing to say about woes is it's not just this judgmental thing. There's actually a whole lot of pity bound up in saying woe to someone. When you say woe to someone, you're basically saying, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. I really wouldn't want to be in your shoes, my friend. Having done what you've done and knowing that God is a God of justice, I would not want to be in your friend. Woe to you. That's kind of the sense of a woe. But here are these 5 woes. And essentially what the Chaldeans are doing, what the Babylonians are doing, is that they're finding their righteousness in everything else but God. So Habakkuk 2 from verse 6. Shall not all these take up their taunts against him with scoffing and riddles for him and say, woe number 1, woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. For how long? And loads himself with pledges. Will not your debtors suddenly arise, and those awake who will make you tremble? Then you will be spoiled for them, because you have plundered many nations. All the remnant of the peoples shall plunder you, for the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. So here's the first woe. The first woe is, you've basically been saying, the one who is righteous through stuff shall live. Stuff. That's what they want. They really want stuff. They really want to consume. They really want to take. They really want to plunder. And Habakkuk is asking us to imagine this really bad dude. Okay, imagine a really bad dude who is just eating up other people, eating up the poor in order to gain stuff and to consume and consume and consume, and he doesn't care who pays the cost for it. But as Habakkuk kind of describes that kind of person, he's making us want to reflect on ourselves, because what's the number one way we are considered in the 21st century? We are consumers, aren't we? And our life is defined by stuff, and our hearts are captured by the latest gadgets. And when my mobile phone contract is up, what do I want to do? Do I want to downgrade? No. Who downgrades? No, you want to upgrade. You want more and better and faster. That's what you want. You want the gleamy, chintzy bling bling. That's what you want. You want the stuff, okay? And it grips our hearts, and it becomes something about which we say, the one who is righteous through stuff shall live. And it's just not true. Woe. Woe to you if you think that. The one who is righteous through stuff shall die. That's woe number one, stuff. Here comes woe number two, safety. From verse 9. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many people. You have forfeited your life, for the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork respond. So again, here is this caricature baddie from the Babylonians. And let's imagine him in modern terms, okay? He has gotten rich quick through exploiting the poor. He's got sweatshops all over the place in order to manufacture his iPhones, and now he's getting really, really rich, and now he has to live in a gated community because everyone just wants to steal his stuff now, and he wants to build his nest on high, and he's seeking safety from the people. But as you seek safety from the people, you're seeking isolation from the very people that you have exploited in order to get your safety. But as we think about that caricature baddie, what about us? Is our life all about seeking safety? When actually what God calls us to is faithfulness in the midst of danger. Calls us to step out into a dangerous world, to give of ourselves, to open our arms wide to people. And yet the temptation is always to fold the arms and to build your nest on high, to go for safety. And essentially this is saying, the one who is righteous through safety shall die. Woe, woe to you, if you are seeking your sense of security and self from safety. And then the third woe, success. You'll notice that all these things are good things, right? Like stuff, there's nothing inherently bad about stuff. There's nothing inherently bad about being safe. There's nothing inherently bad about success, as we'll see. But if you seek your meaning in these things, they will crumble between your fingers. Here's the third thing. Success from verse 12. Woe to him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Behold, is it not from the Lord of hosts that people labor merely for fire and nations weary themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. You know, God's great design is to spread knowledge of the glory of the Lord to all the nations. That's his great desire. Our great desire is to build a city. Cities in the Bible, do you know, Babel, it was not only a tower, it was also a city where people just wanted to build this thing, to make a name for themselves. And we're always trying to do that. We're always trying to make a name for ourselves through our achievements, through our performances, through our successes. And we're trying to build ourselves up. But the one who is righteous through their success in life shall die. That is no way to tap meaning in life. That is sinking sand. That is not solid rock. So woe to you if you're seeking righteousness. You're seeking to live by your successes. And then fourthly, sex. Verse 15. Woe to him who makes his neighbors drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk, in order to gaze at their nakedness. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourself and show your uncircumcision. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. Here's the caricature baddie for this woe. Here is a guy who's just wanting to get her drunk so he can take her back to his room. Or even worse, here's the guy in the bar who's spiking her drink with a date rape drug and taking her back to his hotel room. That's what this guy is. Getting people drunk so he can gaze on their nakedness. And there's this drink and sex thing that's kind of going on. And as wicked as that is in its caricature form, we've got to say for ourselves, how do we misuse the good gift of sex? How do we misuse the good gift of drink? How do we seek our own righteousness and sense of self in our sexual conquests, in having a sex life, or in living for the weekend? How do we do that? Yet the one who is righteous through sex, the one who is righteous through drink, the one who is righteous through living for the weekend shall die. Woe to that way of life. And then fifthly, the fifth woe is a false spirituality. A false spirituality. Verse 18, what profit is an idol? An idol is a fake god. What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it, a metal image, a teacher of lies? For its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, to a silent stone, arise. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath in it at all. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So here is this quintessential act of false spirituality, okay? Making an idol, literally, chiseling out a little wooden statue and bowing down to it. You make it, and then you treat it as though it's your maker. How stupid. And yet we do the same thing, don't we? We remake God in our image. We do it every time that we say, I think I like to think about God like this. I like to think of God as this way. I prefer to think of God like this. What do you call that? That's making God in your own image. But we love to do it. We love to have this pick and mix spirituality. I'll take a little bit from this, a little bit from that, a little bit from the other. Pick and mix works really well at a sweet shop. But there are other scenarios where pick and mix does not work so well. A pick and mix pharmacy does not work so well. I'll take 6 blue pills, 3 green ones, and surprise me with the 10th, right? Doesn't work, okay? There are some things that you should not be pick and mix at, okay? And dealing with gods is number 1 on that list, okay? There is a living God who has made himself known. For us to then remake him in our own image? How silly. And those who are righteous through their own pick and mix spirituality shall die. These are these 5 woes. These 5 woes. People trying to tap life and meaning and significance and justification through stuff, through safety, through success, through sex, through spirituality. It just doesn't work. It can't work. But Habakkuk has a way out. He tells us, there is a true refuge. There is judgment coming, but there is a safe place from that judgment. We'll see it next time we visit Habakkuk. In chapter 3, it starts talking about the Anointed One, the Messiah, the Christ. And when he comes to planet Earth, he comes as the true house of God, the true place of atonement, the true place of refuge. And he is the true Israel. And so this next image, here is Jesus. Jesus comes as the house of God. And you know what he does? He stands at the head of the queue and he takes the judgment on himself. There are a million reasons to love Jesus. Here's number 1. He volunteers to stand at the head of the queue and to take your judgment and mine. What a God, what a Savior. We've just read about the cup that's being passed around. Verse 16, the cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you. It's this Old Testament image of judgment. It's pictured as this cup. It's as though all of hell is distilled into this cup and it's passed around. And we're all in the queue to drink this cup. We all should drink this cup because we've all lived for sex and safety and success and all these other things that we shouldn't. We've all lived for the wrong things, and we need to drain this cup to its dregs. And we're in the queue, and we're shuffling forwards and shuffling forwards and shuffling forwards. And there's no use in pointing the finger at other people in the queue. That doesn't help you. There's no use in saying, I'm not quite as bad as the guy in front of me. That's no use. You're still in the queue for the cup. What are you going to do? Well, wonder of wonders, as you're in the queue for the cup, you spot that on the far side of that cup, there is Jesus, the Prince of Heaven, God the Son. And there he is in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he is contemplating drinking that cup. Do you know that the night before Jesus dies? There he is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's sweating blood at the prospect of drinking down the judgment of God. And in that garden, he's basically resolving to say, God, I see what's going on. Either I drink the cup or they drink the cup. Either I get judged or they get judged. Either I go to hell or they go to hell. And after praying for an hour, Jesus stands resolved and he says, Father, let it be me. I will drink the cup. I will take the blame. I will bear the wrath. And now we stand forgiven at the cross. That's the good news of the gospel. Do you know that good news of the gospel? Do you know that that's what the Bible is actually on about? From Genesis to Revelation, you know that every page of this book is telling that story. It's not about good people trying to get better. It's about foolish, stupid, sinful people like you and me who are offered refuge in Jesus. What is a refuge? You know what a refuge is? You know when it rains, you've got an umbrella, okay? An umbrella is a good refuge, okay? It gets wet, you stay dry. That's a good refuge, right? Or to make it more serious, there's nuclear Armageddon, okay? I told you it would be more serious. Nuclear Armageddon. Bombs are falling. And you make your way down to the nuclear bunker, okay? The mountain gets hit and you remain safe, okay? Jesus is our refuge. He takes the hit. We are kept safe. Which is why Habakkuk says, you know, the one who is righteous through faith shall live. Because what is faith? Faith is trusting Jesus, taking refuge in Jesus. Faith is saying to Jesus, look, I'm done with tapping meaning through all these other meaningless things. I want you, Jesus. And if you just say to Jesus, I want you, well, welcome home. He shields you. He dies for you. And he rises up again to be the house of God. And now together as the house of God, we go out to the world and we say, come home to Jesus. Come home to Jesus. And as we do that, knowledge of the glory of the Lord reaches out to the nations as the waters cover the sea. That is the gospel. That is the good news. And there's one great test for whether you've understood the gospel. You know, one great test is, are you waiting for Jesus? Are you longing for Jesus? Do you want Jesus to return today? Do you want that? Or would you feel a little bit fearful about that prospect? Or would you feel, oh, the party's over then, right? That would be inconvenient if Jesus showed up. What do you feel if Jesus showed up today? How would you feel about that? Actually, Habakkuk is all about waiting for Jesus. In Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2, O Lord, how long shall I cry for help? Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1, I will take my stand at my watchpost. It's all about watching, waiting, eagerly desiring for Jesus to come, to raise this world up the way that he was raised up, to resurrection glory. Are you waiting for Jesus? And if you're waiting for Jesus, how are you coping with the delay? How are you coping with this macro delay that Jesus has not yet come to set the world to rights? How are you coping with that macro delay? And how are you coping with the micro delays in your life? You know, you're praying for things and you want Jesus to come through for you on this issue and that issue, and he hasn't yet come through in the way you want him to. How are you dealing with those delays? How are you waiting on the Lord in those situations? Do you cope well with waiting? Do you cope well with delay? We don't tend to, do we? We are a very impatient culture, aren't we? I read a statistic this week that we actually check our phones 85 times a day on average. 85 times a day, always seeking the next update. We want to stay updated to things. We binge watch our TV. We cannot wait another 7 days for the next episode. We need to watch it now. We have no patience for these things. Amazon's next day delivery, that's too late. I want same day delivery, right? This is how we live our lives. We want instant gratification, fast food, speed dating, quick fixes, 6-second abs, and no buffering, okay? And we are incensed if there is buffering, right? I'm reminded of Louis C.K., this stand-up comedian. He says, you know, he once saw a kid sort of pressing a button on his phone and going, because he had to wait. And Louis C.K. shakes the kid and he says, it has to go to space. Can you wait just a minute for it to get back from space, right? This is what we're like. We want instant stuff, instant gratification. How do we cope with delay? Let me give you 3 points from Habakkuk about how we cope with the macro delay of Jesus coming back and how we cope with our little micro delays. Jesus hasn't yet come through for me on the things that I want. Maybe you should bring to mind right now those things where you feel like God has pressed pause on your life. Maybe bring to life those things, those prayers that have as yet gone unanswered in the way you want them. Bring them to mind. And here are 3 things from Habakkuk to help you. Number 1, God is working on a different time scale to you. Newsflash. God is working on a different time scale. Habakkuk 1 verse 12 says, God is from everlasting. Habakkuk 3 verse 6 says, his ways are everlasting. This is a different time scale. In 2 Peter chapter 3, there's this poetic way of putting it. To God, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. Okay, that's like a poetic way of putting it. But let's even take those numbers literally. They're not meant to be taken literally, but let's just, in terms of conceptualizing, if that's true, then the canvas that you're painting on is one size. The canvas that God is painting on is 365,000 times bigger than your canvas, okay? It's bigger than that, actually. But in all your wildest imaginations, if you're casting your mind to the furthest horizons that you can possibly understand, God is working on a canvas 365,000 times bigger than yours, okay? God is not working on your time scale. Can you have patience? God is doing something far grander than you can see right now. He really is. Second thing, God is working with different goals. Chapter 2, verse 14. God's great goal in the unfolding of history is to see the knowledge of Jesus spread through the nations like a flood. That is God's great priority. Again, 2 Peter 3 says, God is not slow with you, as some count slowness. He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish. So, grand picture, why is God delaying? Why is Jesus delaying? Is the world needs to come home to this love. And aren't you glad that God has delayed until now? Until you've been able to take refuge? This grand macro picture is that Christ has delayed as part of God's gospel patience in order to usher in the world to this safe place. There is an evangelistic purpose for the delay of Jesus. But now think about the micro delays in your life. Is it possible that there is a pause being pressed on your life because of an evangelistic motive? Maybe you're just thinking you're stuck in a job that you just can't stand, and it seems like door here and door here and door here is just keeps getting shut, and you're stuck and you're stuck. Well, maybe there's an evangelistic purpose there. Maybe right here and right now is where you plug in as a disciple of Jesus and where knowledge of the glory of the Lord floods out from you right here, right now. Maybe this isn't God pressing pause on your life. In fact, I don't think God ever presses pause on our lives. Oh, he presses pause on our plans. He doesn't press pause on his own discipleship of us. So maybe God is working with different goals to you. And then finally, maybe God is working in a different direction to you. You see, the direction of travel we naturally have is I want to get the stuff, I want to get the safety, I want to get the success, I want to get the sex, I want to climb, I want to raise myself up. But the way of the disciple is to pour yourself out, okay? And maybe you're feeling impatient because you're trying to climb all the time. And circumstances are getting in your way and it's angering you. But actually, God is not into you climbing up and building your CV. He is working on your character. And working on character takes time. There are no shortcuts to character. Maybe you know this poem. I prayed for strength, and God gave me difficulties to make me strong. I prayed for wisdom, and God gave me problems to solve. I prayed for courage, and God gave me dangers to overcome. I prayed for love, and God gave me troubled people to help. I prayed for patience, and God made me wait. I got none of what I asked for, and everything that I needed. You think God has pressed pause on your life. He hasn't pressed pause on your life. Maybe he's pressed pause on your plans. That is not the same thing. He is at work right here in these delays because there are no shortcuts to Christ-likeness. And therefore, these delays that you are feeling are not a departure from your true Christian walk. This is not your Christian life on hold. This is exactly where God is at work. So have patience. God is working on a different time scale. He's working with different goals. He's working in a different direction, but He is working. He has given you Jesus as your eternal refuge. He has declared you righteous in Him. You now live eternally in Christ. One day, the knowledge of Jesus will fill the earth like a flood. He will return on that happy last day to set the world to rights. And He's at work in you now through all these delays to make you more like Jesus. So verse 3, if He seems slow, wait for Him. He will surely come. He will not delay. Should we pray? Let me pray for us. Lord Jesus, we praise You for being our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. We praise You for taking the blame and bearing the wrath so that we might stand forgiven at the cross. We praise You that we are righteous through faith in You and that we will live eternally. We do wait for You. We do say, come, Lord Jesus. We want You to raise up this world the way that You were raised, to bring it into resurrection glory. But as we wait, work on us. Wake us up to all the opportunities we have now in this time of patience, in this time of Your knowledge spreading to the nations. Wake us up to what You are doing right here and right now, that we might wait well. Amen.